This is chapter 7 of my book, We Are Emmanuel, How Man Became God. According to Genesis 2:17, in the day Adam ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he was to die. The purpose of this chapter is to ascertain what this death was and when it was to occur. Jim Palmer wrote, Adam and Eve entered into a fractured human existence of disharmony, discord, division, and separation. They left their childhood innocence and became carnal. However, Yahweh did not then, nor did he ever thereafter, abandon them. They were, however, condemned in their own conscience and left with a sense of shame. For Yahweh's part, he hung around even as they worshipped other gods. But the relationship was not and could not be as it had been because the people would not allow it. Not because Yahweh would not have at any time been with them and helped them, as he always did when they asked. But there was no permanent fix, and nothing the people did could change that. Yahweh himself would achieve reconciliation. No man called Adam died biologically the day the forbidden fruit was eaten, nor did Israel die biologically when she strayed from Yahweh and became caught up in idolatry or adultery. The Israelites were steeped in idolatry from the beginning. Abraham came from a polytheistic family, and Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, stole her father's idols and hid them under her skirt. Not even the great King Asa, whom Yahweh highly praised as being perfect with the Lord all his days. Let's see. Not even the great King Asa abolished idolatry out of the land. The truth is that idolatry had not ceased in Israel even at the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. Isaiah 26:9 says, By this therefore shall the iniquity of Jacob be purged, and this is all the fruit to take away his sin, when he makes all the stones of the altar as chalk stones that are beaten in sunder. The groves and images shall not stand up. Idolatry would not cease until Jacob's sin was cleansed. Even many of the early disciples of Jesus still believed in other gods, and they weren't condemned for doing so. Just check out 1 Corinthians 8. Yahweh continued to work with his people. He kept on blessing Abraham's descendants by sending prophets to them, reiterated that his promises would be fulfilled, and finally was patient and long-suffering with Israel, even after she killed his own son. Adam was to die and have his eyes opened at the same time, in the day that he ate of the forbidden fruit. When Moses, and all that he represented, entered the picture, he picked up as the husband/Adam in the story, since he became the lawgiver and therefore the taskmaster that would rule over Eve/Israel and her descendants. Moses was quite literally, and because of his wife, the first lawbreaker. He wrote the tablets. Moses warned the Israelites that they were to obey Yahweh's commandments if they expected all to be well. Deuteronomy 28 tells the whole story. Basically, Moses told the Israelites if they obeyed Yahweh, he would establish them as a holy people, open his good treasure to them, make them the head and not the tail, the good seed and not the bad, the son and not the servant, the God or ruler and not the devil or the one ruled. If the Jews did not obey, Moses stated, great curses would befall them. Yahweh would rain down powder and dust upon them until they were destroyed. They would be smitten before their enemies, and their carcass would be meat to all fowls of the air and to the beasts of the earth. Again, beasts were people. They would be blind and grope about in the dark at noonday, and no man would save them. There would be a proverb and a byword among all the other nations. They would be hungry to the point of eating their own offspring, thirsty and naked. They would have a yoke of iron about their neck until they were shattered. A nation whose tongue they could not understand would come against them and besiege their gates until the walls came down, and they would be left few in number. Again, Israel would be blind, hungry, thirsty, and naked, all problems Jesus came to fix. This grave threat of punishment did not deter Israel. Such threats rarely deter bad behavior. And Moses seemed to know that the Israelites, he knew what they would choose. So perhaps it was inevitable that Abraham's seed, Adam, would go down in shame. What's amazingly beautiful, however, is that the going down of the Israelites was the bringing up of the glorious kingdom of the Christ. The fall of Adam was necessary for the raising of the Christ. Even in Israel's death, Yahweh was glorified. When Jesus began his preaching, he found, as was to be expected, that Israel had not walked as Yahweh desired. The last book of the Old Testament warned Israel that the day that would burn as an oven was coming, and that day would leave Israel neither root nor branch, if she did not transform herself when Elijah came to turn hearts back to Yahweh. However, the Jews were still grievously sinning against Yahweh in the first century when Elijah appeared. Here's how Jesus described Israel, Matthew 13:15. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. Again, Israel's eyes were not open. She chose to be blind. Israel was not yet dead because, as stated previously, Yahweh continued to bless her and honor his covenant with her. Paul later said Israel was blinded for a purpose, and that'll be considered in a later chapter. David Tim wrote, in that defiled consciousness, they were alienated and enemies of God in their mind by wicked works. This is because the works of the law could not cleanse the conscience. Adam was not cast aside by Yahweh immediately when he ate of the forbidden fruit. Yahweh had plenty of time to let Adam die in the day he ate. After all, a day with Yahweh is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day. Yahweh remained with Abraham to bring the Messiah who would reverse the effects of Adam's disobedience, and Adam's descendants continued to be Yahweh's chosen people. Adam stayed in a covenant relationship with Yahweh until the time of Jesus. In fact, when Jesus came preaching, he said that Adam/Israel was the light of the world, a city set on a hill. Later, the Apostle Paul proclaimed that Yahweh had not cast away his people. Circumstances had changed, but Adam/Israel was still in covenant with Yahweh. His spirit guided him through inspired prophets throughout the duration of the Old Covenant until he finally, in 70 CE, thrust out the wicked Jewish nation and took the vengeance that Moses declared would happen if the Israelites failed to obey. Yahweh always had a remnant of faithful people, of course, but Israel had broken the covenant. Even so, Yahweh kept his covenant with her. In New Testament times, Moses and the law were the serpent, the taskmaster husband, the bondwoman and her son, and the Satan, who was ruling over the people. This is clearly presented in the pages of the New Testament. Yahweh had divided the waters and taken the Israelites out of the land of Egypt in bondage, and they went right back into servitude. Man is his own worst enemy and seems to enjoy bondage. Many Christians even today have trouble living without law. Although Adam and Eve were to die in the day they ate of the forbidden fruit, they did not die biologically that day. The tree of knowledge of good and evil was not poisoned. The fruit didn't kill human beings. In fact, the tree was not even a literal tree, any more than the tree of life was literal. The two trees, according to Francois Dupois, and as I've said, represent the law of works and the law of faith. Sarah chose works when she gave Hagar to Abraham in an attempt to bear a child. Israel chose works with their law of works and also their desire for a king in order to be like the other nations. By seeking a king, they rejected Yahweh's rule over them. But Adam and Eve did not even die covenantally in a 24-hour period. Because Israel was still in covenant with Yahweh, and nobody biologically died the day Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden fruit, biology and covenant can be ruled out as far as happening in a 24-hour period. Therefore, either the death had nothing to do with either biology or covenant, or it was not to happen in a 24-hour period within the framework of the Adam-Eve narrative. However, Jesus, second Adam, and true man of the sixth day, would indeed die within the same 24-hour period that he took the sin upon himself. Adam and Jesus were connected. In fact, as has been pointed out, they were one person. Adam's story from beginning to end, at least as interpreted from the New Testament, is the Christ story. This man lived and reigned one day or 1,000 years. This must be true because the nation had to be built in one day, according to Isaiah 66:8. Adam lived 930 years. He lacked 70 years to fulfill one day, 1,000 years. So he did die within that day. But he was given that one full day of life. The heavenly man fulfilled the 1,000 years, the day that Adam was to live, die, and become Christ. It should be pointed out here that Jesus called himself the Son of Man, not a heavenly man. While he walked among men, he took no power over anyone, but actually became a servant. Jesus and Israel/Adam both lived for a time together on the earth. Through Christ's redemptive work and the patience of Yahweh, and through the faithful remnant, Adam hung on for 70 more years after Jesus was born. Jesus was Adam, man, and therefore a part of Adam, man. He was the last Adam, man, 666. So Adam had to still be walking the earth if there was still a 666 on the earth. In that 70 years, Adam, the beast, 666, was continued to be built into the Christ, or spiritual man, 888. The son of the bondwoman and the son of the free woman basically strove together during that time as the final battle was being fought for preeminence between the natural and the spiritual, to see who would end up the head and who would end up the tail. It's clear that even in the 1st century CE, the first Adam had not yet met his demise because he was still alive when Paul wrote 1 Corinthians 15. Summarizing this point, Adam lived 930 years on his own and then 70 more as the imminent Christ, or spiritual man. That made a total of 1,000 years that the first and second Adam lived. Since a day with Yahweh is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years is a day, Adam lived one day and died at the end of the day, at which point Christ rose from his ashes. That day Adam lived was the 6th day. Therefore, Adam died the day he ate of the forbidden fruit. The intent of the story in Genesis is not to convey the idea that a man called Adam literally lived 930 years. People don't live 930 years. The whole story in the first chapters of Genesis, as well as the story in Revelation, is a metaphor, never meant to be understood any other way. Prince Adam lived out his full day, 1,000 years, because he gradually changed, transforming himself into the image of the heavenly man. He eventually died to himself and or was crushed into the dirt, and Christ was the preeminent Adam. Just as a baby is conceived and matures for 40 weeks so that he or she can be born into the new world, and as Yahweh made the Israelites wander in the desert for 40 years before entering the physical promised land, so Yahweh gave the 1st century people 40 years, 30 to 70 CE, in which to be conceived and mature to the point that they could be born as a new people or new man in a new covenant. A nation was indeed born in a day, according to Isaiah 66:8. Numbers 14:33 says, "And your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness." Micah 7:15 through 20. According to the days of thy coming out of the land of Egypt, will I show unto him marvelous things. Who is a God like unto thee, that pardoneth iniquity and passeth by the transgression of the remnant of his heritage? He retains not his anger forever, because he delights in mercy. He will turn again, he will have compassion upon us. He will subdue our iniquities. And you will cast all, and thou, this is referring to Yahweh, thou wilt cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. Thou wilt perform the truth to Jacob, and the mercy to Abraham, which thou hast sworn unto our fathers from the days of old. Matthew 24:27 through 34, leaving some out. For as the lightning, or light from the sun, comes out of the east and shines even to the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. The dead carcass of Adam, Israel, Moses, would be buried and would die in the earth, and the Christ would emerge. Were these people alive inside the womb? Yes. But was their birth complete? No. It was a 40-year process in literal years, but to Yahweh it was a day or 1,000 years. The reason Jesus could say that anyone who believed on him would never die was that although Adam, though still in Adam, would definitely die a painful death and then immediately be transformed into the risen Christ, those who were in Christ, the embryo hidden inside him, would not be hurt by this second death. The fact that Jesus said a person would never die is proof that the person was not dead at that time. If Adam and everyone in him was already dead, Jesus couldn't have been the Son of Man, Adam, and his words would have made no sense. Death was still coming and was imminent for those who had not left Adam, already died to themselves, and entered Christ as they waited to be born or reborn. Adam would finally die when the law of sin and death died. As the second treatise of the Great Seth says regarding the Israelites, for they had a doctrine of angels to observe dietary laws and bitter slavery, since they never knew truth, nor will they know it. The senseless and blind ones are always senseless, always being slaves of law and earthly fear. Adam could have chosen life, but he chose law, and he would die along with the law he chose. Thank you all. Bye.